Thank you all for being here. We're gathered here at a place of healing and hope, the John Vulcan Academy Farms. It's a very interesting organization that it's well worth looking into. But in the meantime, we were very thankful that they would offer us this location where we could do our press conference. And we're here to talk about something that should concern every Canadian, how we treat those who are struggling. Now, most of us know someone struggling with mental illness. Maybe it's a son or daughter, a mother or father battling depression, feeling like the world has left them behind. Now, imagine that when they go for help, that they're faced with long delays and no access to support, but instead they're offered MAID. And that's where Canada is headed in 2027 if we don't change course. So that's why I've introduced Bill C-218, the Right to Recover Act. This would make it illegal to offer medical assistance in dying to someone whose sole medical condition is a mental illness. Now, this bill is without saying, we don't give up on people. So imagine someone suffering from trauma, PTSD, depression, or just feeling completely hopeless. They could walk into a hospital, ask for help, and instead be offered MAID. Now, that's the law in Canada right now, although it's currently on hold until March 2027. Now, most Canadians that I talk to find that completely unbelievable. They say to me, there's no way that's true. But unfortunately, it is true. And that's the law that we currently have on the books. And Liberals have had to put it on hold twice due to pushback from so many different stakeholders. And that's why I was compelled to table the Bill C-218, the Right to Recover Bill. This bill would put an end to MAID for solely mental illness. Now, MAID for mental illness doesn't protect the vulnerable. It targets them. It reaches people not when they're stable, but when they're at their lowest. And they're in crisis, isolated, without enough support. So we're here because with mental illness, recovery and hope is possible. People can get better. And Canadians struggling with their mental health deserve care and support, not a state-sanctioned path to death. So later you're going to hear the story of Donna Duncan and the tragic outcome of her mental health crisis. Hers is one of many heartbreaking Canadian stories that illustrate the consequences of a system in crisis, leading to desperate decisions made by the most vulnerable in our society. We've heard many stories, and we've heard even of veterans being offered MAID, including a Paralympian also trying to get a ramp who was offered MAID. We had a woman with suicidality who went to emergency for suicide prevention and was told about MAID instead. These are proof that Canada's MAID regime is putting people in danger, offering death when people are really what they're asking for is dignity, support, and a chance to recover. Even the United Nations has weighed in. In its March 2025 review of Canada's assisted dying regime, the UN warned about our MAID regime, including that expanding MAID to people with mental illness, it puts us on a dangerous path, and this legislation should be repealed. This is not the Canada that I know. Now, according to Angus Reid, 70% of Canadians are worried about the expansion of MAID for mental illness, and rightly so. The Liberal government's own expert panel couldn't even agree on how to accurately predict if someone with a mental illness wouldn't recover. And psychiatric professionals have said over and over again that recovery is possible. So why are we making death an option for people we know could recover? Mental illness can be overwhelming, but it is not hopeless. There are thousands of Canadians alive today because someone believed in them. Someone gave them time, treatment, a second chance. And that's what this bill is about, giving people that second chance. Now, today, I'm sending out a message, along with the many organizations and individuals who have signed on to support my bill. And I'm going to give you a small list. We have Inclusion Canada, Indigenous Disability Canada, the Baitul Mukarram Islamic Society, Vedic Hindu Cultural Society, the Pakistani Canadian Cultural Association, and a whole list of many individuals that are supporting us. And many of them working on the front lines of healing. And we're here to tell Canadians there is hope. You have a right to recover. Now, we need to send that message, and we need to send the message that we don't want any more death by despair, not in a country like Canada and not on our watch. And now I would like to introduce and acknowledge the courage of these three individuals here behind me. First of all, Andrew Lawton, Member of Parliament, journalist and author, who's seconding my bill. And he courageously is sharing his own experience with mental illness. He survived a suicide attempt and has said that if MAID had been available to him at his lowest point, he might not be here today. His story is a powerful reminder that recovery is possible and that offering death to those in crisis could mean ending lives that might have been saved. Then we have Alicia Duncan, the daughter of Donna Duncan, who died by MAID during a mental health crisis. Now, Alicia has courageously stepped forward to honor her mother's memory by sharing their story with Canadians. Her firsthand experience reveals how easily vulnerable people can be swept into a system that treats despair as terminal. Alicia's voice is a powerful plea for change and for compassion. And we have also the Honourable Graydon Nicholas, former Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick, former provincial court judge, respected First Nations advocate. Now, Graydon brings decades of legal, social, and community and leadership to this discussion. He's a member of the Wolastoqiyik Nation, was co-chair of the Stakeholders Advisory Council and a member of the First Nations Advisory Council regarding Indigenous youth and suicide prevention in New Brunswick. He has long warned that expanding MAID sends a dangerous message that the lives of people with disabilities and those facing mental health challenges are less worth protecting. His voice is one of moral clarity, reminding us that a compassionate society never abandons its most vulnerable. Their voices matter, their stories matter, and they are why we must act now. Mental illness is treatable. Expanding assisted suicide to people suffering from mental disorders will result in premature and wrongful deaths of Canadians who could have recovered. Bill C-218, the Right to Recover Bill, will ensure the safety of all Canadians suffering from mental illness. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand it to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for the opportunity to be here and for tabling this bill. I'll say up front that C-218, the Right to Recover Act, will save lives. My name is Andrew Lawton. I'm the Member of Parliament for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South in Ontario, and I am also a suicide survivor. 15 years ago, I very nearly succeeded in ending my life to suicide. I had an intentional overdose and was in the hospital on life support and in a coma for several weeks. This was the culmination of what had been a years-long battle with mental illness, and one that I very nearly lost. Now, I want to share a few things that are important for context here, in that suicide is something that if someone is inclined to do it, and they share this with a medical practitioner, it activates a responsibility, a legal and ethical responsibility to treat that person. One of the gravest issues with the laws that are set to go into effect in 2027 is the lack of differentiation between someone with suicidal ideation who needs to be stopped and supported versus someone who walks into a medical office and seeks MAID as a service because of their mental illness. And that is one of the most important things that needs to be addressed in this. At the end of the day, people who went through what I went through 15 years ago believe that their life cannot get better. They believe that there is no hope, that there's no chance of happiness, no chance of success. I never would have believed at my lowest point in 2010 that I could be standing here today as a member of Parliament, as a husband, as someone that has a life that I'm so happy with. And all of that was only possible because I was given the support and care that I needed to go through what I did and come out the other side. The message that I share with anyone who's struggling with mental illness is that I got better. And no matter how difficult and how painful it is to be living with mental illness, to be living with the desire in some cases to end your life, there is hope. And it's incumbent upon all of us as a society, as a community, the healthcare field, the government, to keep hope alive, to ensure that patients, the people struggling, have a right to recover. And that's what this bill does. And as Tamara mentioned, I am not convinced that I would be here today if MAID were available 15 years ago for people with mental illness. And the reason I share that is because I was very rational and logical. I had, with myself, justified why mental illness was, or why suicide was the right thing to do for me, why it made sense. And I could have and would have made that case to a physician as well, that I did not believe life could get better, that I did not want to give it a chance, that I wanted to avail myself of this right. When we license the usage of MAID for people with mental illness, we are actually giving credence to the idea that hopelessness is permissible and that hopelessness is what we should be embodying when it's the opposite. So the reason I was so honored to second Tamara's bill is because this will save lives. We have a near consensus among so many different groups and stakeholders, people connected to communities that see disproportionate suicides in their communities, of people representing the healthcare fields, medical ethics, all of whom are saying that this is not a road that we should go down as a country. So I am encouraging all members of Parliament to vote for C-218. I am encouraging all Canadians to ask their members of Parliament to support this bill. This is not something that should be partisan. This is something that will literally save lives. And there are very few things in law that we can say that about as clearly as we can with Bill C-218. There is going to be in the coming weeks a national campaign that we are going to be launching that will encourage Canadians to tell their stories, because my story is not at all in isolation. I have been from the bottom to now a place that I am very happy with, and I know that so many have gone through that journey as well. And through this campaign, we hope to not just instill hope for people who are struggling with mental illness, but also point out the fundamental flaw with the incoming changes to MAID that we hope to correct with Bill C-218, and that is that hope is always possible, and we need to ensure there is always a right to recover. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And now we're going to hear from Alicia. My name is Alicia Duncan, and today I'm here to share my mom's story and my family's story about the horrific outcome of what can happen when we allow poorly legislated laws around medical assistance in dying. In February of 2020, my mom was in a minor car accident. My young daughter was in the car at the time, and she was completely fine. However, my mom was diagnosed with a concussion, and 3 weeks later, we went into COVID lockdown. It was very difficult for my mom to access care at the time, and over the next 20 months, her health slowly deteriorated. She began losing weight. The doctors were unable to determine what the cause could be. They ruled out everything from cancer to fibromyalgia. It was 2 days before my mom's scheduled medical assistance in dying that she let us know that she would be dead in less than 48 hours. And my sister and I, knowing that she had no terminal diagnosis, no diagnosis other than depression, that something was very wrong. And we believed that we could stop this because surely the law would protect someone like my mom in a mental health crisis. And so we went to the police. And the police told us that there was nothing we could do, that they could do, because all of the paperwork was in place. We were outraged and we could not believe that this was happening. And they told us that in order for us to stop this, we would need a court order. And so we went to the provincial courthouse and we pled for my mom's life in an emergency hearing. And thankfully, the judge granted us a warrant for my mom's arrest under the Mental Health Act. Sadly, my mom, who was suffering from suicidal ideation, attempted to take her own life, and she ended up being sectioned, ironically, in the psychiatric unit that she used to manage as a psychiatric nurse. I can't explain to you
how traumatic it is to be relieved that your mom is in a psychiatric unit. We thought at this point she would be safe, that she would be protected. But 48 hours later, under the Canadian law, she was assessed again, and being a psychiatric nurse, she knew exactly the things to say to pass the assessments. And 4 hours later, we received a text message that my mom was dead and her body had been taken to a crematorium. I have since been diagnosed with PTSD. My sister has been diagnosed with PTSD. And under the expansion of our law in 2027, this would qualify us for medical assistance in dying. That irony is also not lost on us. Over the past 3.5 years since my mom's passing, my sister and I have spoken in parliaments worldwide. We have shared our story on international media platforms to warn people what can happen when we trust that the legislation is going to protect vulnerable people like my mom. My mom, who was self-starving, who was starving herself, who was 78 pounds at the time of her death, was not protected by our laws because under our current legislation, she was deemed as someone who was terminal. Let me be clear, my mom had no terminal diagnosis. I have spent over $40,000 with the top law firm in Canada fighting to get my mom's MAID assessment records. Her death was the first investigation into a MAID death in Canada, and the police were forced to close their investigation because the Fraser Health Authority, to this day, has refused to release my mom's MAID assessment records. Our family believes that the law was not followed, and there is absolutely no recourse for families to ensure that my mother's death was lawful. I believe it is morally irresponsible to consider expanding a law that has so many gaps currently that someone with a mental health condition who starved themselves could be approved. This is just one sad case of an example of what can happen, and I am terrified about what will happen in March 2027 if we allow this to expand for people who do have mental health conditions. I highly encourage every single person to contact their MP to support this bill. This is not an issue for any political party. This is a human rights issue, and I really, really just want to reiterate that we can't protect our family members. There's nothing we can do to protect our family members and our loved ones if we don't change the legislation. And so I just want to thank Tamara again for bringing this to our attention, and so we can hopefully save vulnerable people like my mom. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we will ask Graydon if he can come and speak as well.
First of all, thank you very much, everybody. And I'm very grateful of the invitation that Tamara issued to me to come here and support her private member's bill. I've been involved in, as a provincial court judge, of course, dealing with people who had mental health problems that appeared in front of the court. Many of them, of course, were assessed or sent to institutions and then evaluated and eventually released. But also in my own community that I'm from, Tobic First Nation, I was involved in this suicide prevention study that was done in New Brunswick. And I teach at university, and I was reluctant to get involved because I'm not a representative voice. So they said, okay, we need you. So I said, okay, we need more of our Indigenous communities in New Brunswick to explain what's happening in our communities with the loss of life. Now, as an Indigenous person and also as a Catholic, of course, I was brought up with the values that life begins at the moment of conception and death comes in its natural end. And the suicide rate is the highest in First Nation communities, Indigenous communities actually across this country. It's shocking. And when I was asked first to participate in the original bill of Bill C-218 against MAID, I went there to testify and indicated that this was wrong. It was wrong particularly for our people, because there had been no consultation, there had been no provision of help for our people who had difficulties in life. And I made my comments, of course, argued strongly for palliative care, which was not accepted by those members of parliament that enacted the legislation. So my view always is we have to respect life in all its stages. We have to provide with the needs and the counseling that's needed for our people to value their life, value their identity, because there's such a past of Indigenous people in this country where they were not respected for their identity and for who they were. But unfortunately, again, the services aren't there. So when we use the term mental health, people have got all these different challenges in their lives. The term for us as Indigenous people is mental wellness. And why do we say mental wellness? Because it brings in the spiritual dimension of who we are as Indigenous people. And this is something, I've gone to social work. I've got a master's degree in social work. And we are not trained at that level to deal with spirituality. We deal with trying to say, can medication help you? Can this behavior modification help you? Can all these things help you? There's nothing in there about the spirituality of the person. And so I've always been an advocate of that important thing. So I guess this is what I'm trying to participate in this discussion and promote and advocate, that we do have to help people. They're in desperate need. And when you're struggling, it's hard for you to get help. It's hard to ask for help because so many times the door at the help center has been shut down. So this bill is that of recovery. You know, when I was Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick, there was a phrase I always used in Latin. It's called spem reduxit, which means there's hope. And that's what the theme was at the time of Lieutenant Governor, way before I was Lieutenant Governor, spem reductis, so restoring hope. And so this is the beauty of this particular theme, is we have to restore hope. And how do we do it? It involves all of us. It involves our spiritual dimensions. It involves everybody to say a loss of one life is too much. So anyway, I want to thank you very much, Tamara, and I wish you well. And I also sit with King and Countess Catholic bishops. This is one of the roles I asked to do as a special consultant as the Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. And so I've spoken out publicly and privately to a lot of groups about the danger of MAID and its modifications. And this is the latest one as well. And I'll continue to do that, even if I'm only going to be one voice out of what it is out there, what I call a voice in the wilderness. But it's important. The voices of those who are concerned about life, the sanctity of life, these voices have to be heard. And the governments have to be responsible then to make sure that life is preserved, life is restored, and life is whole. I want to thank you very much in my language, William.
Thank you so much, Graydon. Really appreciate that. As you can tell, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of reasons why we need this bill to get broad support. But now we would like to offer you an opportunity to ask a question. I actually don't know what time it is, but I know we have to. Okay, so we'll have a bit of time for questions. Maybe Sanj, do you want to kind of organize it? So. Okay, so we have a microphone so we can hear your question. You can ask anybody.
So please just introduce yourself if you can. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News. The Benelux countries, as far as I know, are the only jurisdictions that are offering, aside from Quebec, which is just fine, made for people with mental health. Is there anything that stands out to you since their rollout that proves as an example of why we should continue with this?
Well, Andrew maybe can speak to it as well, but I actually think we have plenty enough examples here in Canada. I think already we have seen so many apparent abuses that have not been tackled in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, they can only be brought out in the media. And as Alicia mentioned, there have been no charges laid. From what I can see, we have plenty enough evidence right here in Canada that we should not be continuing. But Andrew, did you want to speak to that?
We have to look at the way that the expansion of MAID in Canada has been viewed around the world and condemned by the United Nations, by other countries, and even countries that have what we would view as traditionally more relaxed restrictions or regulations around MAID have still looked at Canada as an example of where not to go with it. And I think this expansion of MAID to people with mental illness is really the line that even a lot of people in Canada who may be fundamentally supportive of MAID view as being a bridge too far. And I think we need to rally around the idea that there is very broad consensus for this among Canadians, among a lot of Canadian stakeholder groups, and that the rest of the world is watching. And I think Canada needs to do the right thing and pass Bill C-218.
Okay, next question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. This is Kuljit Kaur from MediaWays. No doubt, my question is regarding your message for the ethnic community. The communities that I saw and do deal with, death premature by assisting, by suggesting, or by helping somebody to complete it is not acceptable, unethical. Right. So the message that you want to send, what are the provisions for the people from the different ethnic communities?
Okay, well, first of all, I thank you very much for joining us today. I know that in my work within the community, I've noticed, especially within the ethnic communities, mental health is a bit of a taboo subject. And so they may not even be aware that this law is out there. So that was definitely my first message, is to let people know, yes, we can speak about mental health. It's a very important issue that we need to put on the table. Don't hide it. And number two, there is a risk to your loved one with the law as it stands if they are going to be challenged with a mental health, with a mental illness. So my message really is don't hide it, but also understand what risks are out there legally for your loved ones to fall trap to something that could end their life. So I don't know, did somebody else want to speak to that specifically? Okay. Did you have another question?
Thank you, Tamara. Understood.
Malin Jordan, Colgan reporter. Every time there seems to be some pushback against MAID in this country, whether it be legally or just kind of public consensus, it seems to swing so far the other way that we're sitting here going, how did that happen? What kind of plan do you have to get behind this bill and so it can get some traction and possibly get passed? Like, what's your plan for that?
Well, first of all, I think it's really good news to know that the first time this bill was originally put forward by EdFast, we actually got very close to passing it. I think we only needed, 9 more votes? So I actually do believe that this particular bill has a very good chance of passing. I think also we need to ensure that the message that we're sending is you do have a right to recover, and that Canadians understand that they shouldn't be preyed upon under when they're in a vulnerable situation. And how are we going to get that message out? First of all, by having you here. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the people that are attending today. Andrew mentioned a program where we're going to try and have people share their stories about I got better. So hashtag I got better. I believe that Andrew is going to be putting one out very soon. And we would like Canadians to share their stories. So this becomes, number one, not a taboo subject. And number two, a subject that brings broader awareness. And then I think the really big job that we as parliamentarians have is to actually reach out to our own colleagues on all sides to get them to support the bill as well. And we need help also from the regular Canadians. Go to your member of parliament and let them know you're very concerned about this situation and that you want them to support the Right to Recover Bill C-18. Andrew?
When Ed Fast bill in the previous parliament came forward, I was so pleased to see that it had support from the entire Conservative caucus, the entire New Democrat caucus, the entire Green caucus, and several individual Liberal members of Parliament. And I think that's important to point out because there was across the board, across party lines support for this. Obviously, we needed a little bit more. But my hope is that with C-218, we can build off of that and encourage representatives of all parties, because this is not a partisan issue, to support this. Everyone in Canada is affected by mental illness in some way, whether it's their own experience or that of a loved one or a family member or friend. And there is a staggering number that are affected by suicide as well. So we need to be building these bridges, and I'm going to be working as hard as I can to connect with representatives of other parties on this as well. I sit on the House of Commons Justice Committee, which I hope will have an opportunity to review this bill if we can get it to that stage. But there was already tremendous support in the political system and hugely from Canadians at large. And I just hope we see Canadians tell their members of Parliament how important this is.
Good, Jim, another question?
Oh, when is this bill going to be voted on?
Okay, so we tabled it the last day of sitting. So it should be debated end of November or sometime in December, where that'll be the first time it's debated. And then, so I assume a vote could possibly happen in December. So we shall see. But in the meantime, we thought it was very important to make sure that the narrative is being told, because we don't want to be surprised, oh, it's time to vote, and we haven't actually built that support and that narrative, which says, you do have the right to recover. And please, Member of Parliament, please vote yes for the bill.
And quick question for Risha. What year did this happen to your mom, and what are the next steps that you're taking right now? Like, are you still battling with Fraser Health?
My mom received MAID on October 29th, 2021. So it's been 3.5 years. The most recent update, we spent 18 months waiting for a hearing, but the OIPC, so the Privacy Commission, has upheld the decision to essentially hold the records from us, saying that her right to privacy remains after death. The police have told us that should we get any new information, they would be willing to reopen the investigation. So there is one other avenue where we can challenge this further, but at this point, we are really just speaking out in media. I have a memoir coming out in October, November, right around the time that this bill will be voted on, just to share more about the details of our story. And I think really it's important just educating people. Most people that I speak to don't realize that you can't access MAID unless you're terminal. And what's actually true is that you can access MAID within 24 hours now in Canada. And people don't understand that. And so just really discussing, I know huge pro organizations like Dying with Dignity love to talk about how, 78% of Canadians support medical assistance in dying, but it's a faulty Ipsos poll that was taken. And when you just ask people in theory about whether they agree with this, they say they do. But when you actually talk about the details of the law and how people can be approved, support actually drops to about 10 to 11%. And so it really is just educating, speaking to people. I'm active with different groups and, obviously Tamara, and just sharing our stories. So, we have no legal avenue really to fight this. And so we're just going to keep speaking as loudly as we can.
Thank you. Was there another question?
One last.
Okay.
Alex with True North. I had a question for Alicia as well. You mentioned that you are a part of the first criminal investigation in Canada with regards to MAID. Are you aware if there are any more criminal investigations related to MAID? And also, generally speaking, what were your communications with the police like during that investigation?
So actually for the research for my memoir, I tried to find any other cases where the police had investigated. And although there were hundreds of complaints, as far as I know, our case is the only police investigated MAID death in Canada. And I think the reason for that is just because of the poor legislation that really it just has to be in the doctor's opinion that a person is suffering. And so there's no burden of proof for doctors. So that's deeply concerning, obviously. And sorry, what was the second part of that question?
what were your communications with the police like, generally speaking? Do you feel like they took your concerns seriously?
Absolutely, yeah. It's the Abbotsford Police Department that investigated. My mom lived and died in Abbotsford. And they were absolutely wonderful to work with. They took our case very seriously. Major crimes investigated for almost 10 months. And at that point, they were talking to so many different professionals and organizations trying to just really understand the law and how this could have happened. Their own requests with my approval were denied to access the MAID assessment records. And so we really collaborated on the entire process. And I felt that they were just as upset as we were when they were forced to close the investigation. And I'm just very grateful for the support that we did get, because I do believe that gave us the credibility to speak on the platforms that we've been able to.
Well, did you have another one?
Well, I have a question for Mr. Lawton as well, please, if I may. I know that criminal justice is close to your heart as a subject. The prevailing thinking amongst the Liberal government with regards to NCR designations is that it's a benign approach to criminal justice because they believe that mental health problems are remediable and recoverable. But now this expansion of MAID seems to be taking the opposite approach. So it appears as though the Department of Justice and the Department of Health, Mental Health and Addictions have two contradictory thinkings on mental health and mental illness. Are you planning to address that in the Standing Committee on Justice when you return from the summer break?
It sounds like we might need to bring you as a witness. You've clearly done a lot of work on this. I think my role as a member of the committee will be to ensure that we hear from as many perspectives on this as we can, that I do not think were adequately consulted in the first round of this. And one of those is that of Graydon. I mean, his perspective on this is tremendously valuable, and different ethnic communities and religious communities and advocacy groups for people with mental illness that have been, as you point out, pushing this message for years, that mental illness is not a life sentence, that depression and serious mental health disorders are not life sentences. And I think that is the message we need to seize on, and that's certainly the message that Tamara, in naming this bill, the Right to Recover Act, has seized on, that we need to keep hope alive. We need to tell people that just as I got better, they too can as well. And I think that pointing this out has to be a crucial part of this discussion. And when people talk to their members of parliament about this, I hope they'll bring that up. And if they have a personal story, I hope they'll share that too.
Well, thank you very, very much again. I know it was a bit of an early morning, but it's a very serious issue, and we're very thankful that you're willing to come out and give us your time, your valuable time, and helping us share the message. You do have the right to recover. So thank you very much, and hopefully we get to do this again soon.